The scene you just watched is from the movie World War Z, and in this scene, we see an infected person viciously biting into a man's arm. After the zombie pulls away, we see a massive, bleeding chunk of flesh torn completely off. Or remember that horrifying scene from Dawn of the Dead where a little zombified girl bites clean through a man's neck, ripping it apart like tissue paper? And that begs the question, could a zombie bite actually tear through human flesh and bone as effortlessly as these movies show us? Or is Hollywood feeding us a beautiful, terrifying lie? Because here's the thing that nobody talks about. Every single zombie movie, from The Walking Dead to 28 Days Later to Train to Busan, shows zombies biting through human flesh like it's made of pudding. Arms get torn off, throats get ripped out, faces get peeled away, and we accept it because, well, they're zombies, right? They're monsters. Of course they can do that. But your jaw? The human jaw we're both using right now? That's the same jaw these zombies supposedly have. So the real question isn't whether zombies can bite through flesh. The real question is, can humans bite through flesh? And if we can, why don't we? What's stopping you right now from biting through your own arm or someone else's? Is it just that we don't want to? Or is there something physically preventing us? And here's where this gets really dark and really interesting at the same time, because the answer is going to make you look at every zombie movie differently. It's going to make you realize that some of what you're seeing is scientifically possible, some of it is complete fiction, and some of it is disturbingly closer to reality than you'd ever want to admit. Let's start with the basics, because before we can talk about whether a zombie can bite through your arm, we need to understand what the human jaw is actually capable of. And I'm going to tell you something right now that might surprise you. The human bite is terrifyingly powerful. Way more powerful than you think. Scientists measure bite force in PSY, which stands for pounds per square inch. It's basically how much pressure your jaw can generate when you clamp down as hard as possible. Now, the average human bite force is around 162 pounds per square inch. That doesn't sound like much until you realize what that actually means. That's enough force to bite through a carrot like it's nothing, crack open nuts, tear through tough meat, and yes, if you really wanted to, break human skin. But here's where it gets really interesting. That 162 PSI, that's just the average. That's someone biting normally, with normal inhibition, with their brain telling them, hey, don't bite too hard, you might hurt yourself. But when you remove those mental limiters, when someone is in a life or death situation, or they're in a complete rage state, or they're high on certain drugs that remove inhibition, the human bite force can spike dramatically. We're talking potentially 200 to 300 PSI or even higher. And we know this isn't theoretical because it's actually happened. In 2012, there was that infamous Miami incident where a man on bath salts attacked another person and literally ate his face. The attacker used his teeth to tear off chunks of flesh, nose, eyes, and forehead. Police had to shoot him multiple times to stop him. This wasn't a zombie, this was a human being with a human jaw, and he did what we see zombies do in movies. So clearly, it's physically possible. But let's put this in perspective by comparing human bite force to animals, because this is where things get really interesting. A domestic dog, just a regular pet dog, has a bite force of around 230 to 250 PSI. A pit bull can hit 235 PSI. A German Shepherd can reach 238 PSY. And these animals can absolutely tear through flesh and break bones when they attack. We know this because it happens. Dog attacks cause serious injuries including torn muscle, severed arteries, and broken bones. Now go bigger. A lion has a bite force of 650 PSI. A tiger clocks in at around 1050 PSI. A hyena, which evolved specifically to crush bones, hits 1100 PSY. And then you get to crocodiles, which have the strongest bite force of any animal on Earth at over 3,700 PSI. These animals can bite through pretty much anything because their jaws evolved as weapons. The human jaw didn't evolve as a weapon. It evolved to chew food. We're omnivores who needed to process both plants and meat, so our jaws are designed for grinding and tearing, but not for killing. We develop tools and weapons for that instead, so our 162 PSI is actually pretty decent for what we need it for, but it's nowhere near apex predator levels. But here's where zombie movies make their first big assumption. They assume that zombies bite harder than normal humans. And depending on the type of zombie we're talking about, that assumption might actually be correct, or it might be complete nonsense. So, let's break down different zombie types and analyze whether their bites make sense. Start with the Walking Dead walkers. These are slow, decaying, shambling corpses. They're dead tissue that's rotting away, their muscles are degrading, their ligaments are deteriorating, and realistically, their bite force should be weaker than a living human, not stronger. A muscle needs blood flow, oxygen, and energy to contract with force. A dead muscle is just meat. It can't generate power. So every time you see a Walking Dead walker tear through someone's throat in one bite, that's scientifically nonsense. A rotting corpse would have less bite force than a living human, probably way less. After a few weeks of decomposition, their jaw muscles would be so degraded they might not even be able to open and close their mouths effectively. But then you get 28 days later, rage infected, and this is where things flip completely. These aren't dead, they're alive, just infected with a virus that puts them in a permanent rage state. And here's the thing about rage, it removes inhibition. Your brain normally stops you from using your full strength because using maximum force can damage your own body, you can tear your own muscles, break your own bones, dislocate your own joints. But when you're in a true fight-or-flight rage state, those limiters come off. There are documented cases of people in extreme situations performing feats of strength that seem superhuman. A mother lifting a car off her trapped child, a person breaking through a wooden door with their bare hands. These aren't superpowers, they're just humans accessing strength they always had, but normally can't use because their brain protects them from themselves. So a rage infected from 28 days later, with zero inhibition and maximum aggression, could absolutely generate a bite force significantly higher than normal, maybe 250 to 300 PSI or more. That's getting into dangerous territory where tearing flesh becomes much more plausible. Then you have World War Z fast zombies, and this is where the movie makes some interesting choices. These zombies move inhumanly fast, they ignore all pain, and they attack with absolute ferocity. The movie shows them biting through arms, legs, and necks with seemingly no effort. And here's where we have to ask, is that actually possible with human teeth and jaws? Let's talk about what you're actually trying to bite through when you bite a human arm. You've got skin, which is tougher than you think. Human skin can withstand a lot of force before it tears. Then you've got fat and connective tissue. Then you've got muscle, which is dense and fibrous. And if you're trying to bite through an arm completely, you've got bone. Now, breaking skin? Absolutely possible with a human bite. We know this because human bite wounds happen all the time in fights, and they break skin easily. Tearing through fat and muscle? Also possible, but it requires sustained force and a tearing motion, not just one quick bite. This is where the shape of your teeth matters. Humans have relatively flat teeth compared to carnivores. We don't have the long, pointed canines that predators use to puncture and tear. Our canines are tiny, almost decorative, so when we bite, we're not piercing deep, we're mostly crushing and grinding. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you've got someone with no inhibition, maximum bite force, and they're using a tearing motion like a dog would, shaking their head side to side while biting down. Could they tear off a chunk of flesh? Actually, yes. And we know this because it's happened. There are documented cases of human bite attacks where chunks of ears, noses, fingers, and flesh have been bitten off. Mike Tyson bit off part of Evander Holyfield's ear. That happened. That's proof that human teeth can remove body parts. But here's the key detail that movies always get wrong. It's not easy, it's not quick, and it's not clean. When a zombie in The Walking Dead bites someone's throat out in 2 seconds, that's fiction. In reality, a human bite attack that removes flesh takes time, multiple bites, and a lot of force. It's not one clean chomp like biting into an apple. It's a sustained, violent attack. Now, let's talk about the pain, because that's the other half of this question. How painful would a zombie bite actually be? And this is where things get genuinely horrifying, because the answer is, it would be one of the most painful injuries you could possibly experience. Your skin is packed with nerve endings called nociceptors that detect pain. When something breaks your skin, those nerves fire off signals to your brain screaming, "Damage, damage, damage." A human bite that breaks skin triggers all of those nerves at once. But it's not just the initial bite. It's what comes after. A bite crushes tissue, which causes bruising and internal bleeding. It tears tissue, which causes shredding damage. And if it goes deep enough, it can hit nerves directly, which causes shooting, electrical pain. People who have survived dog attacks describe the pain as absolutely unbearable. We're talking 9 out of 10 on the pain scale, comparable to broken bones or severe burns, and that's from a dog bite. A human bite that's trying to tear flesh would be just as painful, maybe worse because human teeth are flatter and cause more crushing damage rather than clean puncture wounds. But here's where zombie movies might actually get something right. In many zombie films, the bite victims go into shock almost immediately. They scream, they panic, and then within seconds, they seem to go numb or lose awareness. And that's actually medically accurate. When you experience extreme pain and trauma, your body dumps adrenaline and endorphins into your system as an emergency response. This can cause a temporary numbing effect and a sense of detachment from the pain. It's your body's way of keeping you functional long enough to escape the threat. So if a zombie bit you, here's what would actually happen. The initial bite would be explosively painful, probably the worst pain you've ever felt. You'd scream, your body would flood with adrenaline, and you might actually not feel the full pain for the first 30 seconds to a minute because you're in shock. But once that adrenaline wears off, the pain would come roaring back, and you'd be dealing with a crushed, torn, bleeding wound that would hurt for weeks as it tried to heal. And here's the really dark part. If it's a zombie bite, you wouldn't have weeks. Most zombie movies show infection or transformation happening within hours or days, which means you'd be experiencing that pain while also fighting off a virus or disease or whatever the zombie infection is in that universe. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the question that nobody asks. Would a zombie even feel the need to bite hard? Think about it. If you're a walking dead walker with decaying senses and degraded motor control, can you even generate a hard bite? Your jaw muscles are rotting. You probably don't have fine motor control anymore. You're just mindlessly opening and closing your mouth on whatever's in front of you. On the other hand, if you're a rage infected from 28 days later, you're not trying to eat the person, you're trying to spread the infection, and the virus evolved to make you bite because biting spreads the virus through saliva. In that case, you might actually bite harder because the virus is controlling your behavior to maximize transmission. It doesn't matter if you hurt yourself in the process because the virus doesn't care about your long-term health. And this brings us to one of the biggest contradictions in zombie movies. The difference between zombies that eat you and zombies that just bite you and move on. In The Walking Dead, zombies tear you apart and consume you. They eat your organs, your flesh, everything. That's a feeding behavior. But in World War Z, zombies bite you once and then immediately move on to the next person. That's not feeding, that's infection spreading. Those are two completely different biological motivations, and they'd result in completely different bite behaviors. If a zombie is trying to eat you, they'd bite, tear, and chew like any predator. It would be sustained and violent. If a zombie is trying to infect you, they'd bite once to transmit the virus and then move to the next target to infect as many people as possible. World War Z actually gets this right. Those zombies bite and release because they're not eating, they're spreading. But here's the really interesting scientific question. Could a human jaw actually bite through bone? Because some zombie movies show zombies biting through arms completely, severing them. And that's where we have to draw a hard line and say, no, that's not happening. Human teeth are not designed to break bone. Our enamel is hard, but it's designed to grind plant matter and tear meat, not crush bone. If you tried to bite through a bone, you'd probably crack or break your own teeth before you broke the bone. Dogs can crack bones because their teeth are shaped differently and their jaw mechanics are different. They have a scissor bite with pointed teeth that can wedge into cracks and apply focused pressure. Humans have a relatively flat bite that distributes pressure across the surface. We're just not built for it. So any zombie movie that shows a zombie biting clean through someone's arm bone, that's 100% fiction. It's not happening with human anatomy. But here's where movies do get something right: the psychological impact of a bite attack. Even if the zombie doesn't tear off a huge chunk of flesh, even if the bite is relatively shallow, the psychological trauma of being attacked and bitten by what used to be a human being would be absolutely devastating. You'd be dealing with physical pain, infection risk, and psychological horror all at once. And in many zombie movies, that psychological break is what actually kills people. They give up. They lose hope. They can't process what happened to them. And that's actually really realistic. So let's bring this all together and answer the original question. How painful is an actual zombie bite? And can the human jaw really rip through flesh? The answer is, it depends entirely on what type of zombie we're talking about. A Walking Dead-style rotting corpse would have a weaker bite than a living human, and their ability to tear flesh would be limited. The scenes showing them ripping throats out in one bite are exaggerated for drama. A 28 days later, rage-infected would have a much stronger bite, potentially 250 to 300 psi or more. And with no inhibition and a tearing motion, yes, they could tear flesh, but it wouldn't be as quick or clean as movies show. The pain would be extreme, comparable to the worst injuries you can imagine, but shock and adrenaline would numb it initially. And no, human jaws cannot bite through bone, so any scene showing a zombie severing a limb with their teeth is pure Hollywood fiction. But here's the uncomfortable truth that makes all of this actually terrifying. Humans can bite through flesh. We have the physical capability, we just don't because our brains stop us. Remove those mental blocks, whether through rage, drugs, or a fictional zombie virus, and yes, the human jaw becomes a weapon. Not as effective as movies show, not as quick, not as clean, but possible. And maybe that's the real horror of zombie movies. It's not that zombies are some supernatural monster with impossible powers, it's that they're just us with the safety switched off. They're what humans become when every civilized restraint is removed, and all that's left is base biology and the will to spread infection or feed. That's why zombie bites are so terrifying in movies. It's not just the pain or the infection, it's the violation of being attacked by something that looks human, uses human teeth, human jaws, human strength, but has none of the humanity left. So the next time you watch a zombie movie and see someone get bitten, you'll know some of what you're seeing is exaggerated, some is impossible, but some of it, the most disturbing parts, are actually closer to reality than you ever wanted to know.